Hi, Jonathan York, my financial partners, looking at investment markets. Another pretty interesting week. US equity markets sort of pushing on. We see a further company hit that $1 trillion market value, Amazon. Sort of quite interesting though. There's an interesting piece this morning in the press that Apple sort of crawled there. Amazon got there in a sprint. But certainly, if you look at the US economy, it is pushing on at a pretty good rate. You still got an expected interest rate increase in September from the Fed, and maybe one more in December, sort of data dependent. But the US economy, it is pretty strong, and that's sort of helping obviously the global economy. The one big question mark obviously is that potential sort of trade war and this sort of ongoing spat that sort of Trump seems to be trying to launch again. Pretty much every sort of trading nation, but obviously China's the big one. Fresh talk about a further $200 billion worth of trade tariffs coming in. If they're actually put into place, that's going to be pretty sort of major, and we'll start to sort of bite into certainly a little bit of confidence, but also sales and growth out there as well. So really what we need to see is both sort of parties sitting down and sort of starting to negotiate and sort of put a deal in place. Now, Trump has obviously managed that with Mexico, in terms of sort of trying to replace NAFTA. Obviously, the only sort of issue there is that Canada was part of NAFTA, and they seem to be excluded from the initial negotiations, and now been included, and sort of almost give a sort of fait accompli that they have to accept the deal. Again, it will be very interesting to see how that sort of plays through. Interesting, this sort of current bull market, certainly in the US, on the 23rd of August, became the longest bull run in history. And certainly all the signs are still pretty favourable out there, certainly for the next sort of 6 to 9 months at least. Say corporate earnings look pretty good. You've got a pretty robust US economy. You've still got, low interest rates, although they are looking to increase a little bit over the next sort of year or so. But that will still put them, historical low levels when you compare it over the last sort of 20, 30 years. Now again, it wouldn't be sort of normal if there wasn't some sort of spat on sort of social media from Trump. He's now criticising Jeff Sessions, who's looking into two sort of senators that are looking for re-election in the midterms in November. Now they're under investigation. Trump has now criticised Sessions for doing this at this time with the midterms coming up. What he does sort of fail to sort of grasp is that Trump was the person who appointed Jeff Sessions. But what Trump fails to sort of grasp is that Jeff Sessions has a job to do, and if unfortunately these senators have been sort of found to be sort of outside the rules, then yes, they should be investigated. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter that the timing is inconvenient for Trump. Certainly, the timing is unfortunate, but that's just the way of it. It's And to now turn around and criticise Sessions for doing his job is one ludicrous. Certainly President Trump's popularity out there is waning just a little bit. Is potentially sort of highlighted by the recent funeral of Senator John McCain. You had 3 ex-presidents there, Obama, Bush and Clinton, but the current President Trump, wasn't invited. That maybe just goes to show the sort of polarization of sort of Trump and and how he's sort of viewed in the US, not just in political circles, but in the public in general as well. He has his staunch supporters, but certainly in the majority, sort of critics and skeptics of his certainly his policies, but just his way of going about doing business. And obviously with the midterms now just about 8 weeks away, it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays through. Potentially the Republicans could lose control of the Senate, and that could pose some pretty interesting issues for President Trump going forward in the last couple of years of his presidency. We're now into September, sort of most of Europe is back from its summer vacation, and certainly a little bit of movement now on Brexit and sort of really trying to get that deal sort of nailed down so it can be ratified by both parliaments, both the UK and the EU Parliament, so we can see Brexit put into place for March 2019. Now, as usual, certainly in the UK, there's a few Eurosceptics. It's just going to be interesting to see how Theresa May and her ruling party can manage to get that through Parliament. With the Iran sanctions now looming sort of November of this year, some of the oil analysts are now pointing to maybe sort of $85-90 a barrel for oil. If that was the case, that will put some pretty big inflationary pressures out there in the global economy. And again, with certainly rising interest rates in the US, and potentially sort of starting to increase around the rest of the world, it'll just be very interesting to see the impact on the global economy. As long as it's gradual, and certainly inflation hasn't really been too rampant over the last 3 to 4 years, the economy should be able to absorb that. It'll just be interesting to see if you've got a knee-jerk sort of spike in inflation, how the global economy would cope with that. Here in New Zealand, Tilt looks like they've got a full takeover now by Infratel and Mercury, and it'll just be interesting to see the take-up from Tilt shareholders. Now, if you're unsure on that, call us on 0800 867 323. A little bit of fixed interest issuance here in New Zealand as well. Still looking around that sort of 5 to 7 years, with interest rates around sort of 4%, sort of plus or minus. So if you're interested in discussing what's available out there in terms of income options, call us on 0800 867 323 or go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles. We'll look forward to speaking to you soon.